Hello, hello, hello. We are back recording our podcast here. Caleb and I are. Caleb, you want to introduce yourself first?
Yep. Yeah, my name's Caleb Svendsgaard and marketing manager for Paris Painting.
And I'm Nate Streeter. I'm the marketing director at Aleph Holdings. And today we're going to walk through how we plan a 2025 marketing, basically create a marketing plan so you guys can see kind of how we do it. And you're going to see Caleb and I do not do everything exactly the same. So you're going to get a feel for where maybe our opinions diverge and where we would kind of argue or push back on each other on
Yeah.
different things. One of the fun things is that we both of us are very data driven marketers. So you're going to see that we make decisions mostly based on data, but you probably are wondering like, well, what are the data points? And that's what we're going to show you. And then I can't wait to hear what you guys think maybe we're doing wrong, or what you love, because we're evolving this constantly too. And many of the evolutions that we made have been from other painting companies' suggestions, right?
Hmm.
So let's dive into it, Caleb. I'll share my
Yep.
screen. You guys can get a feel for this. All right. Okay. So some of you have seen this before. I bet if I make this a little bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that helpful for you guys who are on like a little laptop or something? Okay. So what we're gonna do at the top of our little calculator, first thing we're gonna do is make a yearly marketing plan, right? For Caleb and I to do a yearly marketing plan, we need context.
Mm.
And because context matters so much, right? Like
Hmm.
what happened last year
Yep.
and what are you trying to do for next year? And where kind of is your brand equity at?
Hmm.
So the beginning parts here are, hey, how much money did we spend last year on paid lead gen? So not your overall leads, but like if you had to buy a lead, what percentage did that lead cost of the revenue it brought in?
Hmm.
So in this particular partner's case, it's 10%. So we have that in our system. We can pull it up. And then same thing, of the percentage of total revenue brought in, what percentage of their marketing was overhead? This would be like staff, photos, different things like that. And and then how much revenue did they bring in this year and how much revenue are they trying to bring in next year? Their
Hmm.
rate of growth, like that's the biggest factor on how much marketing is going to cost. If you're not trying to grow at all, it's going to be cheaper. If you're trying to double, it's going to be way more expensive, right? And then these factors that you and I have kind of curated over the last, well, maybe a couple quarters, I would say, Caleb, is like,
Hmm.
well, how much of their percentage of total was on paid? How many years have they been in business? How many reviews do they have? How much organic monthly traffic do they have to their website? Do they have like a guerrilla marketing team on the ground, of any kind? Are they
Hmm.
spending money on content, pictures, photos,
Yep.
or on videos, things like that? And then you can see these algorithms just help us like go up and down as the percentages of what we have built in here. This is just all based on data that we collected from our 15 different partners. And
Hmm.
then what it does is it shows, okay, you're going to need $2.5 million of paid marketing. That's really important, right? Because of this 4 million, how much do we have to go out and get? We're not going to get it from repeat referral. We're not going to get it from the sales team. We're not going to get it from those kinds of things, right? And so we need to go out and get 2.5 million. It's
Hmm.
1,436 total appointments throughout the year. And the algorithm is going to say, hey, based on everything I can see above, I think you're going to have to spend $310,000 to do that. And it's going to be about 7.7% or almost 7.8% of your gross revenue. Now, what Caleb and I are about to do is, okay, we look at that, and that's just a recommendation the way we think about it. We want to get all this data in here so that we can at least start with the base level, like, okay, what's the reality? We sort of mostly ignore this, right, Caleb? Like we're not, we do use it as a reference point, but I
Hmm.
think we take kind of also great pride if we can beat the algorithm. Um, so that's really what we're going to do down here is we're going to plan all the campaigns out for the year. What percentage are we going to get from them, right?
Hmm.
So how many repeat referral, how much sales team, so on and so forth. And some of that will be based on how many we did last year, right?
Hmm.
So you can see like these are numbers that we all enter in. We got 236 appointments for repeat referral. Well, I made it too big now. Let's come back a little bit. I don't think that will be too crazy for you guys to see. No, that'll be fine. So let's leave it at that size. So you could see these are the numbers from last year. 21.5% was from repeat referral, 18% was for the sales team, so on and so forth, right? Okay, enough talking, enough setup. Like, let's start working on this, Caleb. So from your experience, let's start with the brand categories. These are the repeat referral, sales team, and outbound.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about this specific partner? What percentages should we try to aim for? What's going through your mind?
Yeah, and I love how you have this built. It's all makes a ton of sense based on past data, and then also just predicting on different goals, which is important. I think for repeat referral, sales team, outbound, I typically start with what last year was. So repeat referral for Paris, for example, has been steady, and most partners that get good reviews, I think they either see an increase or at least stabilize at percentage. I see this company is trying to grow almost $1 million, so it might not be a huge growth in percentage. They probably are going to stabilize at that same percentage, probably around 20%. So I think how you have it makes sense. And then obviously the sales team's a little bit higher, so it really depends on how their comp is built and how hungry they are.
Yeah, I mean, those two things are exactly the things I would think about too, is like, well, what's their customer experience been like over the last 12 months? That's going to have a big impact on the repeat referral. And then what's the public view of the customer experience, which is the reviews, right? So there's that internal, if you guys are doing NPS or something like that. And we do look at that as a marketing team, because if let's say the budgeting team comes back and says, no, we can't spend anywhere near this, double this. It's like, we need to be able to come back and say, no, it's based on data. This is what the NPS was. This is how many reviews we got. We're not going to get 40% of our leads from repeat referral. That's impossible. And so the marketing team is just as a backbone, right? Of just saying, no, that's fake news. You guys can't just move these numbers like this, right? So,
yeah, especially if you're trying to grow too. Like even for Paris, we're growing a lot, but like the percentage is pretty stable. So the only way you'd grow repeat referral is if you didn't grow as a company and you decided to turn everything off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we leave this at 20% because we're going from 236 to 287. So we're adding like 50 there. What I hear you saying is that's not crazy. You're going to probably, assuming we did a great job this year, we got the reviews, which we could kind of see we did. We got 60 reviews in this case in the last 12 months for this partner. My little algorithm up here, you can even get a glimpse into that. It's 48 is what the goal would have been. And so looks like they're on the right track. But we probably don't want to push this too far, right? Because we do want this based in reality. It doesn't do us any good to build a plan that's not based in reality. Now, in this particular partner's case, their sales teams are studs. I mean, look at this. They got 200 appointments this year from their sales team. They're really good at self-gen, because they really only have, I think, 2 sales staff. Yeah, around 2 sales staff. So it means each salesperson's doing 100. So it's like a couple a week that they're generating themselves. So they get a little bit more sales staff this year. We'll see. They might hire someone partway through the year. I'm not sure how they'll do that, right? That's not our job to figure that out. But the reality is at some point they're going to probably add a half a staff, And so what are we thinking? That we go from 200? We probably want to look into it and see how they got those 200 and whether we think they could do it again, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about your sales team. Like, what's the trajectory on at Paris? Like, how have they been building this? Are they getting 2 a week?
No, I think it's
okay.
Well, it's very isolated based on the rep. We have some studs on our team and then some that hardly do any.
All right, don't use names then, because that won't be.
I won't use names on the podcast.
Okay.
Start calling people out, but
Yeah. So tell me what the studs are doing, and tell me what the duds are doing. Like how many per week?
Yeah, I should look at the year. I believe some of the studs are doing, multiple per week, like you shown there, and then there's some of them that, like for example, for this month of October, they've gotten 0 so far. So it is pretty varied. But that percentage overall isn't like super far off. I think we're maybe 12% or something. So we're
Yeah,
definitely not as
because
big.
Paris does a good job of this, right? But we have partners as low as like 5% or even
Mhm.
less.
Yeah.
So, and remember, like as the marketing person, it's like, well, we got to drive these numbers up. It doesn't cost that much, right?
Yeah.
You could see we only have $2,000 budgeted for the whole year. This is just like them going out to dinner. It's them being part of the BNI group, whatever they want to do to generate, leads for themselves.
Hmm.
It's just not very expensive, right? So, yeah, I think the other thing you didn't mention that I see is, well, how new is your sales team? Because a person that's brand new, this is way more difficult.
Yep. Yep.
So if you have a whole new sales team, so that also affects, like if you're trying to grow fast, half your sales team's brand new, this number goes way down as a percentage because it's like my new guys aren't going to be generating a lot of stuff for themselves in the first couple months.
Hmm.
So this would be good for the marketing team to be thinking through this of like what's realistic for the sales team to really get.
Yeah.
In this case, they're not going to be adding a lot of new staff and they're studs. And I know for a fact in this particular company, the both of the sales reps are going to be on for next year. And they've been building an extraordinary amount of momentum.
Hmm.
So I think the new person probably won't add a lot, whoever they add. So maybe keeping it around this would be 18 to 15. So it's going to go down just a little bit.
Hmm.
Okay, what is outbound? That's like when we hire companies to help us either, go out and get some leads, right? In different
Hmm.
ways. They might call lists, they might do different things. We're going to spend 15,000 on this. We got 66 appointments this way last year. I don't think this is going to go up that much. So that was my thought was like, yeah, this will probably go up a little bit because we'll have some
Yeah.
momentum, like carryover basically, right? But otherwise, the market is going to affect this a lot. And it probably isn't going to be much different market next year as far as demand for our products and services.
Yeah. And I don't know how how the other companies are doing, but it seems like outbound it hasn't been as effective for Paris. And maybe that's just the approach that we have, but it feels like the success rate isn't as high. So we try not to like push into it super hard. I'm not
It
sure.
it tends to be like we just have more luck with commercial on this side of it.
Oh,
So
sure.
this $15,000 that this particular company is doing. Most of those 72
Okay.
appointments are going to be commercial.
Hmm.
So which is great. Like for those of you that have a mix of commercial and not, this is where you should be spending your money if you're using those kind of companies to do that kind of work. Some of them do email, some of them do phone calls. They all do different things, but
Mm.
um, it can be a big push on your overall sales. Um, all right, so are we feeling pretty good about this? We got about 40% in our brand categories.
Hmm.
Um, I love that. I always say, hey, about a third to maybe 40%. That's a good range to be in for this category. If it's too high, you might not be growing fast enough,
Mm.
and you also lose control.
Yeah,
So I don't want this to be too high.
that's exactly
This,
where Paris is at. It's about 40%. So that's
if it's too low, it's going to be very expensive. We have a couple partners of ours like that. I think they're just maybe even trying to grow too fast then.
mm.
Or you just are going to be like, yeah, I'm growing this fast, but I'm suffering in the profit category. Like I'm going for it. I want to get
Hmm.
from 2 to 5 million as fast as I possibly can, or from 1 million to 4 million as fast as I possibly can. So, yeah, it's going to be painful though, right? Okay, let's get into digital then. Man, I know you and I have some different thoughts on this category, so let's see what this particular companies did. Okay, you could see there's not huge amount of PPC traffic for most painters, right? So we can't. Most of our companies aren't doing 30% of their appointments from LSA and PPC and retargeting. These kinds of ads are what we put on this line. But you can see we're going from 139 to 144. That's basically flat, right?
Mm.
Is what this plan is. Basically 12.6% to 10. The reason I was thinking this, Caleb, and tell me what you think. This particular partner, I think we're doing decent with this. Our lead costs are they're pretty good. In fact, I think this might be closer to 200, which I feel fine about. Um, and so, but I don't think that there's like a huge amount of room for improvement, if that makes sense. Like I think it'll be fairly flat.
Mm-hmm.
Paris is way lower than this, right? I mean, you guys are not bringing in that many appointments from a percentage standpoint for your paid clicks.
Yeah, our overall digital was like 14% this year.
Okay. Yeah, and in this situation, I'm planning for 33%, so about double.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are such studs at direct mail and at neighborhood. You don't like mail and flyers, and so you guys are a little unique that way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You could afford not to be as good at digital, is maybe a different way to say it, because you're so good at neighborhood. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, for Paris, it's like we're trying to even grow digital and get better at all these things, but it's kind of like a disproportionate amount of spend, and our ROI just isn't as good. So it's hard to justify. Like next year, like I think even 2 years ago, we were at only 10%, 11% for digital, which is just crazy to even think about that. In digital, I mean like particularly meta ads, PPC, LSA,
Yeah.
Nextdoor, online organic, and that's like crazy. So this year we jumped about 4%. The next year we do want to jump a little bit too, just to make sure that we're not just in paper marketing, but
Yeah, I mean, Caleb, like when I took over in 2020, like that second half of 2020, granted, huge market. I had a lot of tailwind behind me, but it was like 70% of our leads came from Paperboy and 20 some percent came from repeat referral. It wasn't even, I think it was just under 20% actually at that time. And then a couple percent from like other things is just like by chance, basically, that we were getting a few other things. So Paris is like really transformed over the last 3.5 years in this respect that we would even have a well-rounded marketing system at all, right? It's sort of a novel new idea in their history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think same thing with organic. This company has been growing. This is pretty good from our experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a lot of you guys have a lot in online organic, but when I really dive into a lot of your data, what I realize is you're miscategorizing. A lot of people will select like heard about search online or something like that or online. Yeah. When I start diving in your data, I realize, oh, you're allocating these way wrong. Like you're paying for a lot of these, or it's coming in from your mail or from your sales. Like there's a lot, and I really recommend you really dive into your analytics. I know Caleb and I look at that, and you can really see where your conversions then are, because your online will show you. And I think for a lot of you, you'll see like, oh, for our web traffic, like only 20% of our conversions come from this. When you look at those categories like direct or like social media, you'll see that there's a bunch that are coming in different ways when you look at the conversions. And then you're like, oh, this is wrong. Like our customers are telling us the wrong data. Yeah. Is a bit different way to say it. And when you go through this, you'll realize like, oh, this isn't as high as I think. That would be my expectation. And your SEO guy's going to take credit for all of it. He wants to do that. Of course he is. But if you really start diving into your data, you'll see, it's fake news.
Yeah, I think with Paris, I mean, we've gotten a little bit better at Matchback this year. And I've seen so many appointments come through, of course, that are like, they put web search, but that's just how they book the appointment. So they're like, oh, I booked the appointment on the web search. Or I'm even thinking, Nate, it was just a hypothesis, but something with Nextdoor. Like I was wondering if people like were thinking that the neighbor next door, they're not thinking about the app Nextdoor. So it's like, oh my goodness. I think
yes.
Do the due diligence of looking through this and at least trying to get it to like maybe like 80 to 90% if you can. You're never going to get 100%, but
for most people that are watching, they're not going to know what Matchback is. Explain it to them like they're, a 5-year-old. What is Matchback?
Yeah, well, now we have all the mailings in a database, all the ones that we mailed this year, and all of the records, and we're just matching back the appointment to the most recent mailing. And like, for example, like a lot of times we plug in an appointment, and it's gotten 5 mailings this year, and you can see each mailing. And that's why it's like the web search, like oftentimes it's a direct mail that they got 5 days ago. And it's like probably the direct mail. They didn't put direct mail. It's still hard to tell sometimes because if they self-scheduled, if they call, it's easy because we have custom phone numbers and everything. But
Yeah.
it's a combination of things. But yeah, the match.
And you guys still have about 60 to 70% are self-booking, or is it even higher now this year?
Yeah, it's 70% this year. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we've been watching that go up. When I first started, we were at under half.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows you how fast this has been growing.
Yeah.
So shout out to the painters that aren't doing that kind of technology yet. It's like, that's what people want. You could go against it, but my experience is anytime you go against what people want, you're gonna have mud on your face, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what people want. They want to self-book their own appointment. So, okay, so we go through online, and you could see, for those of you who wonder how much we're spending, we spend about 500 to 550 a month on SEO. That's what you spend too at Paris, or are you guys spending even a little bit more?
It's just a little bit more. It's like 800.
Okay. But you probably wouldn't recommend someone spending like 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 on SEO.
No.
Why? Why? Because this is only 115 appointments. Like, for us, the ROI would make sense then.
Yeah, well, for us, I mean, our location isn't great, actually, which is ironic. We've talked about this before. We're in a bad location. But I think with online organic, I think it's something to definitely be steady on, definitely invest in. But I think people that are investing like 2,000 or more, a lot of the SEO people are doing somewhat similar things at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I do think it's still not controllable at the end of the day. And actually, we get most of our worst leads from online organic.
Oh, isn't it so interesting? People, and the SEO guys want to fight me on this. They're like, well, how could it be the worst? If people look up painter in city, like clearly they've got intent to buy. I don't know, but I can tell you we track better than anybody in the country, and our data says it. I can't tell you exactly why, but I could tell you that our data shows clearly that these are not the highest quality leads ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I would push my data against anybody's for accuracy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with you, Caleb. I don't think the lead quality is that high. And I think the other thing that they tend to try to get really sneaky about is the conversion data. We've already talked a little bit about that, but even beyond that, at Aleph, we only consider something a conversion if they self-schedule an estimate or the phone call is over a minute. That's a big difference. A lot of these guys will want, heck, I mean, they're even doing conversions just like a click. It's like, no, that's never a conversion, right? Like, or any phone call or any visit to the GMB page. No. Those are not conversions. So just be careful of what they're tracking, and don't spend too much on this, and make sure you're spending in line. Some of our partners, I don't recommend spend anything on SEO. I know that might sound crazy, but if you're smaller, I just don't think this is where I put my money right away. I think it's more of a helper than, as you get bigger. The other thing I probably would mention about this, make sure you're doing local SEO. I have had several partners come in. I won't name them. I think this would just be easier to do this. They're getting actually pretty good traffic, with some of these like blog posts and stuff, but it's national traffic, and it's usually like something like, what stain should I use on my DAC, or it has very specific things like that. And they get several thousand, people to come to their website, but it gets no conversions, no local conversions at all. And it's like, it also, from everything I can measure, it doesn't help lower their costs on PPC or get them more LSA or anything that I could see that's beneficial. So I just want you guys to know, like, yeah, we got a bunch in our portfolio that are doing that work. Do I think it helps? Not that I can measure anyway. It's not like there's any more appointments for those people. It just, the only people I could see that it makes look good is the SEO company, because he could point and say there's more traffic here. That's the only person that seems to benefit from it. So I just don't think it's worthwhile.
I think to your point, what we did with our SEO vendors just had about a dozen long tail keywords, and they were pretty easy to kill. And we're ranking for all of them now on the top page for all of them. It took a little bit, but I think if you're just focusing on a short list of keywords in your top neighborhoods or top cities, like, St. Paul painter near you or whatever, I think that's valuable. But if you're trying to get like painter near me, you're probably going to lose to like Yelp. Like Yelp is outranking us, which makes no sense. But we're just trying to go for Minneapolis painter near me because we know that we can win that keyword.
Yeah, Angie, Yelp, Better Business Bureau. The list goes on and on. These are really good SEO companies. That's really what they are, partly, or else you guys could see they bid against us for clicks too.
Yeah,
all those companies do. And thank God we have a person that's much bigger than us that hates these companies, which is Google. And they're going to continue to work every year. You can see that they're working against these companies. They do not like the lead aggregators. They would prefer them not to be in this equation at all. And that's partly why LSA is going to get combined with the map pack in the coming year, is what I've heard, is to continue to push them down, basically. But it is also a money grab by Google, because even less organic will happen than when they combine the LSA with the map pack. So there you go. Frustrating situation for you guys. This number will probably go down, actually, when that happens, because a bunch of those ones that you used to get for free from your map pack, they're going to monetize that. Google will.
Yeah.
So it's very frustrating, but hey, they run the search internet right now. So, okay, what about lead aggregators? I could see they had 16 appointments come in. This would be things like Angie's, well, things we just talked about, right? Craft Jack, Angie's, Thumbtack. What is it? Torch. What are the other ones that we've used?
I don't know. I try to forget.
Painter's Choice, I think, is the other one of the other ones. Anyways, so you guys aren't doing any of it this year, Caleb?
No.
And most of our partners have moved away from these guys. My grandma used to say, if you play with snakes, don't expect not to get bit. And that's kind of how we look at lead aggregators. These are not good companies. Sorry for those of you guys that are going to be at the trade show, but I don't think you have a good company. So I don't like the way you do business, and I would prefer not to use you. Sometimes we use you, but it's regrettably, basically. And you could see in this case we have 0 plan, even though they got 16 last year. Most all of our partners have moved away from lead aggregators. What about social media? So this is both paid and unpaid, the way we lump it all together. Tell me what your feelings are. Like, what do you want to do for Paris, and how does that compare to what we got on this plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty high, but I mean, I don't know how they do well or how they do on that. That's about how much we spent on Facebook overall this year. Was about 40,000. And
but
yeah,
3 times, or 3 times as big a company as this is. So you're only at like 5% of your gross on Facebook.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the content. I would ask, how much are you spending on content? The social media, I would spend equal parts content and ad spend nearly. That's what I've learned this year, at least, is I've gotten advice from different people, and I've seen just meta ads how we don't have enough content, and I would at least burden some of that spend in content. They'd say, oh yeah, we're fine with 40K in social media, but then I'd maybe take 10 to 15K of that and just make a bunch of content.
Yeah, I mean, what he's really talking about here, let's mess around with this, Caleb. Like, I love where your mind's going with this. He's not saying, hey, yeah, we could still get 215, we could still spend 43,000, but what I want to do, my cost per lead is going to go to 100, and I'm going to spend an additional, this is going to be more like, way too much, like this. Oh, there you go.
I guess I didn't even.
2.8 million here. Oh man. Now I've done it. So something more like that, right? Where it's like now all of a sudden we're spending maybe even a little more on content than the actual.
Yeah, and I think that's more than sufficient. I think 10K would be good for content. We have, 10 to 15K. I think you can get a lot of photo shoots and videos with that.
If we went to this one to 20%, so we go down to 5, then we bring this up to what I think would be a more realistic number, like 150.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I coming up with that? Well, what I'm thinking is I'm going to spend $50 a lead, and I'm going to convert a third of those leads into appointments.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably, I think you guys are spending a little bit less a lead than that, aren't you, on Facebook?
Yeah, I don't know for the year, but it's about 40, 50.
Yep. And could you convert a third of them?
Yeah, we're 30 to 40%. Just it's fluctuated a bit, but yeah, around that range.
Oh man, I would beware. I know some of you Facebook advertisers are like, Nate, that's crazy. We could convert 60 to 80%. I'm not completely comfortable with that because my sales team is probably not as good as whoever you're sending those appointments to that you're converting 60 to 80%. We need to sort out the leads that aren't really ready to buy, right? So we're pickier because we need to have those success rates up over 30%. Otherwise, if we get below 30%, it creates a lot of problems for us in our whole, because then 15% here, if this is too low, it just messes with this number. We're never going to get it up to 4 million.
Yeah, and with
right?
the sales cost is higher. So, or what we've talked about in the past, it's like, yeah, if you convert those cheap leads, you could probably get your lead cost down to like less than $100 for sure on Facebook, probably 80 if you're really aggressive. But you're just going to increase how many appointments your sales team needs to get to, and then you're going to have to hire. This person's going to have to hire 3 full-time sales staff if they do that.
Right, exactly. So and that is like much more difficult problem to solve, right? And you're not necessarily gaining control, and that's our primary objective here. We do have more control because if we had a week where we needed to get a few more appointments, things were slower, we could be a little less picky on Facebook if we felt like that might make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you've actually gained some control in that equation of like, well, we have some room to be less picky, and that's what we'd want, right? Because that gains us control with Facebook. I think for the same reason, I usually do not like to see this to be more than a third of no matter what, because you're creating too much risk. Facebook goes down for a couple of weeks. You got a couple ads that all of a sudden get disapproved or they just stop pulling. I mean, Caleb, you could tell probably Facebook pain stories for 10 minutes straight, right? I mean, everybody who's spent tens of thousands of dollars on Facebook has pain stories, horror stories, war stories, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
So I just don't want this to be too high.
Yeah.
Oh, now shout out to you guys who got 80% of your budget and you're really good at this. I get it. Like a few of you are so good at this. You feel so confident. You got 15, 16 different ads that are performing for you. But that's not your average painting company from my experience. They just can't keep up with that pace of content either. That's one of the things you were kind of mentioning, Caleb, was like, well, $20,000 worth of content, that's, let's break that down for them. Like, how much are you spending for a photo shoot or a video shoot?
Yeah, photo shoots, like, just like before or after pictures is anywhere from like 100 to 150.
Yep.
And then video shoots is often closer to $300 to $400. And that's kind of how I budget.
Yeah, so you might have like a couple dozen video shoots and you might have like 40 before and afters, if you were spending a budget like this, right? And then you've got how many just basic photo shoots that are like with people in them?
Yeah, with people in them. Yeah, those are also like usually $300 to $400 because we give them a gift card, usually like a $200 gift card or whatever.
For the painters or for the homeowner, whoever's in it, you're going to give them some money to make that a little bit easier for them to pose and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, usually at least 25% of that is for the actual person.
Yep. Yeah, bravo, man. You're doing it right. I wish every one of our partners thought like you do on this, and obviously that's my goal.
Yeah, because if you want to get a good homeowner shoot, like, I mean, you might have a raving client who's just like super, super excited to do a photo shoot, but that's probably not the case. And you do need to give them like significant, like $200, or they usually they usually react to $200 from my experience. Like 100 or less is kind of like, I don't know. That's kind of.
And make sure you take a bunch of pictures just for them, right? I've seen
Yep.
that we were doing that as like, this isn't all branded stuff. I'd say half the pictures are just like family photos, pictures of their pets, pictures of their house. Like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? And so we've got kind of two strategies there, which is you either have social equity you built with the client, like it's a friend of the company, or you just bent over backwards on their painting job and they feel like they owe you something or they want to give you something. But then there's the other people where it's like good for the goose, good for the gander. Yeah. You're getting photos with them because they get something out of it. And that's okay. Like, you need both of those if you're going to have a successful content strategy in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got 20,000 here. We got our digital budget. It's about 33%. Oh, we're going into your favorite category here. Maybe one of the better. You might be one of the best, if not the best, at neighborhood marketing in the country. I'll shout out to Caleb. He's amazing at this. Let's talk about it. What do you do with yard signs? What's your team? Are you guys getting 3% of your appointments from yard signs? What are you guys doing?
3%. I'm going to have to look at the percentage, but it looks like it's. Let's quick do the math. I think it's not that high.
Paris, by the way, is not the best partner at this. I already know that for a fact. So shout out to you guys who are better than Paris at this.
Actually, I think we are going to get 5% this year from yard signs.
Okay. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, actually, it has improved, but I think it's a little bit of an attribution issue sometimes too, because they put direct mail yard sign. It's probably direct mail, and sometimes it's like, don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, that is a tough one. It's definitely a helper, right? It helps everything. I think Mark's most successful partner who does this, he's in a small market in the middle of the Midwest, and he puts out 100 yard signs outside of job site yard signs. So this is like yard signs at the end of neighborhoods, stuff like this. His business or his team is very diligent. They've got it on their scorecard. They take pictures. Like he's got all them like sort of things in place to keep the accountability, and it generates like 8 to 10 appointments a month for him.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get your team to do that, I mean, even Paris probably has a hard time getting out 100 yard signs that aren't in people's yards, right? But that is a phenomenal way to, now, I know a few of you, it's like, like we were in Memphis, you guys got some cities that outlaw yard signs. It's crazy. Well, we did finally pay a fee for one of those. So like that tells you sort of our attitude about it. I won't go into detail too much, but it's just like, whatever, send us the bill. So it's funny because most of the cities won't take it very seriously anyway, ironically. It's some crazy homeowners got together and did it, but it doesn't really matter to the city. So
I am excited a little bit about yard signs because we always put them up before we wash or when we wash the home, and we have the LED signs up and everything. But I think next year we're going to test out more like semi-permanent yard signs for like 2 to 3 months, like more professional yard signs. We're going to give the homeowner like $100 gift card. Hey, we'll come back and pick this up. It's like kind of a metal one. Pick it back. It's for like the large jobs that are like $20,000, $30,000. And then, people are going to see that for a couple months. So we're going to try that out. At least 100. I want to do 100 of those next year in the spring so that our yard signs are out immediately. But
yeah, shout out to Tom Heiler. He's the one who I think I don't know if he pioneered this idea, but he's perfected, I think at least. And he does this all the time, right? Like keep it out to Labor Day. He does like keep it out to 4th of July. No, he does 3 cycles, I think, right? Keep it out to Memorial Day, keep it out to 4th of July, keep it out to Labor Day. Tom, correct me if I got it wrong, man. And then he gives $50 gift cards in those different sequences. So he paints somebody's house in April. He says, hey, keep this out to Memorial Day. I'll give you, $50. And then of course you pay them up. You give it to them up front.
Yeah.
Right. You trust that they're going to, but I think what Caleb is taking this to even is like, because I think Tom just uses coral signs, but you're saying, hey, you drop off a metal sign. They're probably that one, they're not going to just throw it away.
Mhm.
And so you probably have some a little bit more permanency in both cases where the customer feels bad if they get rid of it. And then you come back and get it at some point,
Mhm.
right? So your team can kind of see that it was up.
Mhm.
I think it's a great idea. I can't wait for you to get data on that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, we'll have to do different phone numbers on those and test it
so
out.
this team is only 2.5%. They only got 28 appointments from this last year. I think they could, obviously, I think they could do better. So part of me is like, we got to keep pushing this up. Companies that are only getting a couple per percentage points.
Mhm.
They don't have vehicle wraps like you guys do either. And I think they're a little spotty on the apparel. So those are all things too. Make sure you guys aren't cheap. You could see this $18,000 if you kind of look in here. We're spending about $1,500 per a million in sales on apparel,
Mhm.
$1,500 per sales rep for vehicle wraps. Of course, you don't wrap every vehicle every year, so you kind of have to remember that. And then the signs, like $5, and you get to reuse some of them, right? Is what this is basically telling you for the calculation.
Mhm.
So, and we're giving away so much content here. You guys should be just hopefully liking this because we're just showing you everything here. But you could see 18,000. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of money, but that leads to 43 jobs, and this could be a lot higher and actually be cheaper. So, from my experience, if this goes up to 5%, this doesn't need to be 60 anymore. It could be much less actually. So
Yep.
you reduce those costs, right? So
Mhm.
all of your sales reps have vehicles that are wrapped.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. I want that for every painter in the country.
We just got
Um,
we did get one bad review. I remember that was funny about if they paint anything like the way they drive, don't hire them. I was like, oh, come on, man.
that's so awesome, though. Yeah, it's tough, but it's funny. Yeah, you can always laugh about those later. Tell your guys to slow down a little bit. Okay, so Garrett Martell, you guys are probably a couple other painters I've talked to are really the best in the business in my mind about as far as direct mail. You probably have a bit more than 6% of your appointments coming from direct mail for this year and then next year, I bet too. Tell us
Mhm.
what your percentages are going to be for Paris.
Um, so across door hangers and mailers, I guess you could call them flyers and mailers, we're 40%. So
Okay,
it's
well,
almost
that's extraordinary.
it's almost evenly split. It's actually
2020.
hmm yeah, it's almost exactly split. Because we do about pretty similar volume too. Um,
If you were spending $450 per appointment for mail, you would not spend 20% of your budget on mail, but yours is like half that.
yeah. Um, Mail's like 257, and then
Nice.
paper boys or our door hanger flyers are 200, 207, 205.
That's really good. And there's more than that. Like, shout out to you guys who've been questioning me on this. Like, Nate, I know for a fact a lot of my repeat referral come in through flyers. How are you guys handling that? Yeah, Caleb has a million that are coming in through repeat referral that are, they literally call or something from a flyer. And we aren't putting that under flyer in most cases when we do our match back. We're
Mm-hmm.
only trying to take away from other ad sources that we think are less likely. But
Mm-hmm.
if the source was like repeat referral or sales team, we usually never take from that because the sales team has a horse in that race, and we don't want to like harm their horse if that makes sense. So because they get a certain amount of bonus and stuff for ones that come into those categories. So anyway, but yes, we could track it and we could see it with our match back that tons come in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So now you could see my thought process on this is they got 215 appointments last year or this year in 2024. And you might be like, Nate, why are you only doing 86? Very expensive. So some of our partners, they might have spent, and I've heard from you guys too. Nate, direct mail used to be so great, but I'm spending $600, $800, to schedule an appointment. It's like, yeah, some of these numbers are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I know they've heard you before, Caleb, but tell them how you've gotten your numbers down to 200 and what did you say they were? 283?
250, 250.
Yeah. So tell them how you got it down to 250 because you could easily spend $600 an appointment on direct mail too.
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's not hard to do. Like direct mail,
Oh
you can
no.
just waste money like it's going out of style, right? So tell them what you're doing.
Yeah. If I flash back to 2023, we did like almost all EDDM saturation type mailings. We did local design, but we only had, I think, a dozen designs like all year. And we had some success with that, but yeah, we were over $300. Well over 300. This year, what we've done is just smaller
What
batches.
before you even go into that, what do you think the difference between someone like because you already are
Mhm.
doing it for way cheaper, even at that moment, 12 designs, 300 and some. Maybe in today's market that might be more like 400. Let's like give it some,
Mhm.
right? Because one more year made a big difference in our market right now.
Mhm.
So let's say it's $400 an appointment for you. You have 12 designs you did for all that. You spent tens of thousands of dollars on direct mail. I mean, I was part of that equation. So we spent tens of thousands of dollars on direct mail.
Mhm.
There's still a big gap between Paris's numbers and a bunch of people in the industry. Why do you think even at that point there's a gap?
We were still doing like city specific neighborhood, like it was pretty generic, but we were still doing like Minneapolis house painters, had Minneapolis homeowner, we had a Minneapolis home. We had the messaging wasn't like it was pretty local. Um, yeah, it was still.
Might mention how many projects you did there, might have good pictures that show houses
Mhm.
from that city, but it was still using like a tool like EDDM, so it wasn't thinking about very much targeting.
Mhm.
We were still data driven as far as what zip codes we were going to, right? So most painters might not even really be thinking like that. They're just like blanketing whole big areas. How many times a year were we hitting them, do you think, with a postcard? Three or four?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So more frequency than a bunch of painters have too.
Mhm.
Now, fast forward a year later, you're even better at digging into the data probably than we were then.
Mhm.
And you're changing all those elements, right? Like how many designs, how many areas, what's on the postcard. Like walk me through that to drive that price even down. So go from 400 to 250,
Mhm.
probably like at least at these kind of volumes too. Because I know some of you guys are like, oh, I spend less than that. It's like, well, how much did you spend? I spent $5,000. Okay, that's not scale. Like we're talking about like spending a couple hundred thousand, and like at
Yeah,
this kind
few
of
hundred
scale,
thousand.
it's like if Caleb only spent 5,000 on mail too, he could probably do it for $54 a thing. Like if he was going to be able to be, not growing at all, right? Like so, and just go into the absolute best neighborhood that we have, right, with a very small budget. But
Mhm.
walk them through like what is it you started talking about it, but like walk them through then, okay, yeah, that's the difference between 250 and 400.
Yeah, there was a lot of mental shifts it took in like some of the limiting beliefs I had about neighborhood marketing. One of them was like, oh, we can only mail to a neighborhood once every month or once every 2 months. Like, we're going to burn people out. Like, we shouldn't mail to them too often. Like, people are going to get annoyed and they're going to write reviews and complain. And, we've had some of that with door hangers, but for direct mail, that's just not a fact. That's a feeling. That's not true. So one thing this year that's changed is, of course, the frequency for sure. Someone asked me, how often are you mailing to these areas? And I said, as often as you have new content.
There you go. I love that.
If you've done a new project in the neighborhood and you want to advertise it and you're proud of it, you should definitely mail to it again, even if it's been 2 weeks. Like if it's new content, people aren't going to get nearly as exhausted as you think, and it actually builds up on top of each other.
How many postcards should I send to each home? More. The answer is more.
Well,
Like go deeper, like, and I think what Caleb's trying to tell you guys is, well, yeah, don't send the exact same postcard over and over and over. Like that's not helpful. That's not surprisingly helpful. It's not
yeah.
positioning you as local and present more. It's not creating more competency. Like these are all the things we talk about here is how do we create more competency, show them we can do what they want. How do we position ourselves as local and present in different ways?
Hmm.
How do we position ourselves as surprisingly helpful?
Mm-hmm.
right? These are some of the categories when you ask about like, well, what kind of content is he talking about? That's the kind of content he's doing. Positioning yourself as friendly, position yourself as local and present, position yourself as surprisingly helpful, position yourself as competent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I show you everything that Caleb's team has produced over the last year, they probably almost 100% of them fit into those categories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of you want to write on your postcard things you care about.
Mm-hmm.
No one cares about some of the stuff you guys talk about. That you start talking about like super paint and and then you make so many things on there. It's just it's all over the place. Like if you look at Caleb's postcards, there's one idea. That's it. He doesn't go off track into 8,000 areas, right? So there's high clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. I know someone was saying too that they've done mail, like they did a couple drops of like 10,000. They did 2 drops of 10,000 in 1 year. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like the worst thing you could do. Like, if I had,
That's what everybody does, Caleb. Yeah.
but he was like, well, what would you do with a $10,000 budget? I was like, well, identify your top, 5 to 10 areas, mail to them like 3 to 5 times. Like, even if it's only a few thousand homes, mail to them several times. Because I think there's this conception that like, I'm going to drop direct mail and there's like low hanging fruit and people are just going to like, just bite the hook right away. And I don't think that's really true. And the data doesn't really show that. Our best direct mail performance is usually after like the 3rd to 5th mailer. At least in some of our core areas this year, we had the best response. Like when we dropped like the 5th one, and I thought it was going to diminish, but it didn't diminish. It actually, because the message was different. It was another home we painted.
And you're also benefiting from years of us.
Yes.
Like the first year I started working here at 2020, we reduced how many areas we were focused on.
Yep.
2021, we reduced them. We reduced them again. You're reducing even more. It's like we've just been going deeper and deeper and deeper into these neighborhoods for years and years and years. And so you start adding that up and it drives your marketing costs down, right? I keep telling people, no, we're going less geography as we get to 12 million, not more.
Mm-hmm.
I think this idea, like, Nate, I can't wait to get to 5 million. I'm going to be in 3 different metros. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what are you talking about? No, less geography. You get to 5 million, you're going to go deeper, not wider. You don't need to be in 5 different different areas. And that's not the right way to do it. And when I've watched other big home service businesses, they don't do that either, right? Like they're going deeper and deeper and deeper as well. So when you really look at, shout out to the guys who are going to be at Live 500 with us in 2 weeks, right, Caleb?
Yeah.
But we're hoping to learn from all these big home service businesses because I know that they go deep. And they go deep with their current list too. We really didn't talk about reactivation much today, but okay. So why? I know you've got this amazing company. I've heard it's amazing, at least, called Paperboy, that you get to spend a lot of money with. But most of our partners and most people in the country aren't going to have this kind of flyer delivery service in their area.
Yeah.
What would you recommend if they build their own flyer team? Do they? What do you see working in that sense?
Well, yeah, I think there's definitely a tipping point for direct mail and then door hangers. Obviously, they work together. They both work together best when they're in tandem with each other. But I think it depends on your direct mail cost. If you're getting direct mail for $200 to $300, then it's probably. Creating a flyer team is a lot of work, and we know that it's a lot of work. So there's a lot of management fee to the door hanger team. That's kind of a hidden cost. It takes your mental space and your energy to get them going. So I think that might be something I've thought about this year too. Is we could have delivered more door hangers, but we've also kind of honed in with mail because the cost is within range. And it's a little bit less labor that we have to try to arrange. So I think it really depends on that. But I think door hangers are still really effective. But I think you do need, obviously, a local message. If you're dropping generic flyers, you should just, you shouldn't do that.
So for the most part with flyers, it's a little different than direct mail. With direct mail, I would still do some local present, but I would focus more on being helpful, a little bit more on some of these other elements, right? And with my flyers, I'm going to very much focus on local and present messaging. Why? Because just think about what a flyer is. If you hang a flyer on someone's door, they're going to just assume you're working on their block, that you're painting
Exactly.
one of their neighbor's house. They're already thinking you're local and present. Like
Yeah.
the very nature of flyers is basically local and present. So take advantage of that. And so you've got headlines, you've got pictures, you've got how many houses you've painted in their neighborhood, and everything you could. Like if we could, we curate a specific postcard and landing page and everything for every single neighborhood. That's a lot of work, but that's probably the direction that we're moving right at Paris.
Yeah.
And that's what I would want for people with flyers. I think you're right, Caleb. I mean, I think building your own flyer team is very challenging. We know how to do it here because we used to own a flyer company. I used to own one, and then we at Aleph owned it until we sold it last year. We still work with them closely, but even for us, helping our partners build flyer teams it's challenging. I think what the most challenging part is I need the partner to spend in the first 6 to 8 weeks. I needed them to spend like 8 to 10 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
They're running a painting business. They're not running a flyer business. They can't spend 8 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me? That sounds insane, Nate. It's like, well, you want to build a flyer team. That's what it's going to take. And so then usually what I tell people then is you probably shouldn't build a flyer team unless you're like 3 million, 4 or 5 million, because you just don't have the time to build something like this out. And by that point, you might be able to have a part-time marketing staff who could spend time on the hiring and the training and the GPS and all the little messing around, because there's a lot of turnover.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like herding cats a little bit to do something like this. Shout out to those guys who've even done a door knocking team, because that's even harder. What's the company in Colorado? They get most all their leads. Big,
Kind.
They're like 15 million. Yeah, Kind. Shout out to Kind. They're good at herding cats. It's a lot of work, and they know that too. I know they do, right? But you could see I have 0 for door knocking team, because at this size, I'm like, no, don't do door knocking yet. It's even harder. Because I think you correct me if I'm wrong, Caleb, but the way I look at it is building a flyer team is like 6 8 weeks of pain, and then ongoing like a handful of hours. Door knocking is like 8 hours forever of pain, maybe even more. Like to run a good door knocking team is just like every day you got to put energy into it.
Yeah, it was only working well when I was doing. I mean, I was probably need to find someone else, but about 20 hours a week. Like someone needs to be managing a door-to-door team for, I think, 20 hours a week. It doesn't even matter the size. Even if it's only one person. I've never had a one person successful. Like I even have a guy that's been door knocking, and I'm just kind of saying, yeah, you can go out there, and I'm not providing a lot of direction and support, and I just wanted to see what would happen, and he's gotten 0. So
yeah, that's so tough, right?
Yeah, but when the team was like running in full speed, when I was out there every day, and some of the guys would get like 15 a week, and everything was running smooth when I was out there every day. But that's just a lot of energy.
Yep. So we plan for 258. We plan for $90,000. Some of this, to Caleb's point, is we'll have a part-time person on this team who's going to be like a group leader. That'll take some of that pain out of whoever's running this business, usually the owner, right? So they don't have to do all the hiring, all the GPS, So this is partly why we spend 90,000. Is we're going to have, let's call it 3 people out in the field that are part-time that we're going to pay $15,000 to $30,000 a year. And then we're going to have one person who's more full-time, who's going to like oversee them, but they're going to also deliver flyers too. So if you're kind of wondering how the breakdown is, and then half of their salary will be in this management staff. And then the other, most of this will be like fractional. Like in Caleb's case, he doesn't have a fractional. Like they have a separate marketing team from our fractional team at Aleph. So it would just be his staff on this line, right? Which you guys are way into 6 figures for this. How much are you budgeting for content next year?
It's like 30. It's a little over 30. We have design and print too. That I think the whole overall, like if you include like some of the sales materials and stuff for printing, it's about 50K. But I think it's 30, about 30-ish of its content.
Okay. And if you don't have a lot of content, you might need to sort of spend for years you didn't do it, right? Because Caleb's got a couple of years where we're spending at this rate now,
Mm,
and he's got a pretty good amount. So another way to think about it, Caleb, is like the second half of this year, you're really spending for next year,
yep.
right? Like it's, I think people think like, you got to think way ahead on this stuff.
Yeah, content's
Uh,
like 6 months ahead at least.
yeah. So like, you don't start this program in like June each year. Like, yeah, we got to start getting some pictures and videos. It's like, no, you're way too late thinking about this. You could start, but it's going to only affect your next year. It's not really affecting this year.
Hmm.
All right. So, and then you guys spend a couple $1,000s a month on software and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Okay. Yep. So those of you who think like no one does that, well, yeah, a lot of us do. They're spending 8,000 here, so $600 a month on stuff like that.
Hmm.
Where do you guys? So you could see this budget is about 8.5% of gross. They're going to spend $342,000 of their 4 million on marketing. 8.55. Could it be lower? Maybe. We just went through all the reasons why it's 8.55, right? Could you be more effective? Of course, you know. But if you're going to grow, it's going to
Hmm.
cost money. Where do you think Paris is going to land as a gross percentage next year?
Um, this year we're at 6.4, 6.3.
Plus the overhead.
That's overall marketing on produced revenue.
Does that include the roofing or?
No,
Okay.
that's just
Okay.
paint. Just paint.
Okay. So that is going to be hard to chase, guys, if you can keep up with these guys. At least it is for our other partners. There are a few that are in that same class with you, Caleb, but most, I would say this would be a smarter plan for them. They're not
Yeah.
going to be as efficient as Paris. They don't have as much momentum as you guys have, is a lot of it, is that you guys have been able to build on top of momentum over many years,
Hmm.
and that does help. So how fast are you guys trying to grow next year? 12 point something million this year? Is that what you're thinking?
Yep. We're
To
close.
what?
Yeah, we're close to 12 million sales right now. We are trying to do, and it might change, but I think 13.6 next year. So
Okay.
like probably another. I mean, we'll see where we land this year. We're trying to get to 12.5. So
And there's a lot of focus at Paris to keep profitable. So a little bit different than some of the other partners or some of you guys out there. Shout out to you guys like Brad Allison who are trying to grow so fast. I love it. But Paris is focused so much on profitability. They want to keep those profit numbers in super healthy ranges. So that's a
mm,
big factor in how fast. I think otherwise we could have been way bigger even by now. Paris could have been.
yeah, trying to
So,
grow more, spend less.
yep, exactly. Yep, yep,
uh,
yep.
it's a fun game.
Yeah. So then, for those of you guys that are keeping track of this, it's like 14% of gross for the sales and marketing costs. 36 is a little high, right? And this would be something that probably we might get some pushback then. It's like, get this down to 35%. That's the portion of the margin, right? That's what we call COM, cost on margin. So if you're at 40%, it's like, well, what percentage of that is sales and marketing? And we're trying to keep that in 30 to 35%. So this is a little high, right? And it's a little high in 2024 and 2025 is my experience for people who are trying to grow quite a bit. In this case, we're trying to grow from 2.9, to 4, and so the growth is about 40%. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty healthy, right? Um,
Mm,
and so it's going to push on this a bit. So, but that's the thought process we have is like, well, we're spending $274 for a paid lead, and we're spending $163 overall per bid. Is that cheaper in 2022? Way cheaper, right? Because demand is the biggest factor, and so these numbers will be completely different than they are in 2024, 2025.
hmm.
So, okay. Is there any other things you wanted to share, Caleb? Maybe next time we could get into some geography stuff. You could maybe go through with us and show us what you're thinking as far as geography.
Yeah, I'd love to get that next time. I think kind of summarize, like, I do think you need to know like the paid bid costs, and you need to, I mean, basically Nate and I, we have to report to other people, and they ask us, what would it cost to grow? And I think hopefully this is helpful for you guys watching this video. Like, you can kind of see if you're trying to grow, the paid bid cost is going to increase.
Everything's going to cost $274 if you want to grow. That's what Caleb's telling you.
It's like, yeah, like we've talked about this before. If you're at $140 per bid, like aggregate overall, and then someone tells you, hey, why don't we just buy more bids at 140? Well, that's not the paid bid cost. Our paid bids, even at Paris, are not 140. They're like 180.
Right.
So I think it helps you provide smart planning, especially if things get really expensive really quickly. You can plug in some numbers and see how that's going to affect your overall marketing budget and plan. So, yeah.
Caleb, thanks again for bringing the heat, man. You guys are doing it as good as almost anybody in the country. Lots to be proud of. I will see you next week. We'll go through some geography.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Nate.